opposition went at great length, Mr. Speaker, to repeal the criminal libel law. And ironically, President Akufo-Addo was at the forefront of that as Ghana's Attorney General. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, in June 2021, the President said at Allege Hotel, and I quote, "I am proud of the modest role I played in the process of the repeal of the criminal libel law. As the Attorney General who piloted the repeal through Parliament, I was also responsible for the discontinuation of the then pending prosecutions under the criminal libel law of notable Ghanaian journalists Tommy Thompson, Kofi Kumsin, and Eben Kwaku for publications against personalities of the then government," unquote. Mr. Speaker, it is therefore tragic that despite the repeal of the criminal libel law, the earned pride of a president for his role, both in opposition and later as Attorney General, and his professed choice for noisy, boisterous, sometimes querulous media over the monotonous, praise-singing, sycophantic one of yesteryears, that we are yet able to find justice for Ahmed Swale, an undercover journalist who was gunned down after his identity was compromised by, unfortunately, a member of this honorable house at a time he and his colleagues premiered their investigations into Ghana football and exposed grand corruption and collusion. Mr. Speaker, for the first time in our Fourth Republic, over 100 radio stations got shut down for what authorities say were regulatory breaches, despite a widely held perception that it was politically motivated, selective, and targeted at media that was critical of government. Mr. Speaker, as of now, I have lost count of the number of state-sponsored or state complicity in the arrest, harassment, and detention of journalists in the last couple of years. Journalists of Modern Ghana News website recounted harrowing torture they received at the hands of the national security operatives when they were arrested for their work. Mr. Umar Sanda of CTFM, David Tamakulo of WhatsApp News fame, the Upper East reporter of EIB Network, Edward Adeti, etc., have all suffered at the hands of people working in the name of the state for their news publications. The Speaker, let me repeat for emphasis that I am for responsible free speech, and I prefer the use of the persuasive powers of the state to achieve it over the use of the coercive powers of state. The Speaker, we must guard against the threat to the most valuable argument today used in defense of our democracy, the freedom to criticize our leaders and their conduct without fear of recrimination. The Speaker, in the last couple of days, Mr. Mensa Thompson, a civil society activist with ASEPA, have had to be detained in custody for a publication he immediately retracted and apologized for after admitting his hitherto credible sources misled him on that particular issue. A broadcaster with Power FM, Ohiniba Buama Beni, was sentenced to 14 days imprisonment for publishing what is said to be false news in relation to justices of the Supreme Court in the last election petition case. A journalist with Media General, Captain Smart, has been arrested bizarrely at different times for a number of reasons recently, including pronouncements he made on the peace and security of the country on air, and what his employees believe was a deliberate setup to charge him for extortion. Mr. Speaker, let me conclude by saying that given the precarious nature of our sub-region, the growing despondency of especially our unemployed youth, and the growing questions about whether our democracy is fit for purpose, that we in political positions ought to guard against the temptation to reduce or to encroach on the channels and opportunities for venting frustrations. I am for free, responsible speech, Mr. Speaker, just as I am sure you are too. But I am against the use of coercive powers of state to guarantee it, because that in the long run isn't sustainable.
Indeed, Mr. Speaker, it is not for nothing that the media has been raised and described as the fourth estate of the realm, having considered the executive, the judiciary, and legislature. They have been considered as another unofficial arm of the governance structure of every country. If their work and the work of civil society is so threatened by such acts as ably raised by the maker of the statement, it tends to endanger our democracy. And this must not be happening at the time when research, Mr. Speaker, clearly shows that unemployment in a certain bracket of our population, which is the youth, is so high. If they cannot express themselves, if they feel that expressing yourself is so endangered in a democratic situation, then people will end up resorting to other means that will not progress our democracy. And if people who can speak for and on behalf of people who by themselves cannot speak also feel so threatened, and they decide to go quiet, government, whether the executive, whether the judiciary, or even the legislature, may not know what is happening behind them.
I believe that even having the opportunity to have privileges that members of parliament have, is not sacrosanct. Definitely, members of parliament must also demonstrate responsibility, though we have some constitutional privileges accorded to us. It does not mean members of parliament can go beyond bounds and the institutions will not work. It also does not mean that institutions should also work beyond their mandate or go against the democratic tenets and principles that we all uphold. And therefore, the Constitution, which regulates all of us, is very important in matters like this. And the Act of Parliament that we've all put together to ensure the serene environment where individuals' rights are observed. But when in demonstrating our rights, the recognition that the other partner or other fellow Ghanaian, whoever is a human being in this country, also has some rights. And that is why at times it is said that your freedom ends at a point where maybe my right also begins. It is therefore critical and very important, like former President Obama said, and he was hailed. For me, I didn't see anything about him being hailed because it's an old adage that we don't build strong individuals, but we build strong institutions. Every democracy knows that. The Italian country some time ago will be losing their prime ministers every 3 months. The country still ran because the institutions were working. And therefore, it is the institution that we must encourage to work and make sure they also work within the confinement of the law. Mr. Speaker, we all know the Media Commission has a lot of ethics, code of ethics, control measures that all of us can play within the institutional framework of the Constitution. Having said that, the media has played a critical role, as I said, trying to narrate the antecedent of this country coming from the military rule to democracy in the 1992. The role that media men played. We can mention the names. But we've gotten to a point where, Mr. Speaker, as you even said before, if we are not careful, this unbridled approach where it is like open to all, anything at all comes out of anybody, and we are not obliging to the constitutional framework and controls, Mr. Speaker, we'll get to a point where this country will get out of hand.
The international community has come to accept a very important barometer, which is the World Press Freedom Index. That is a barometer that assesses how well countries are doing when it comes to press freedom. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, Ghana has lost its #1 spot. Not too long ago, we were #1, the shining example, the star performance when it comes to press freedom in Africa. Unfortunately, we have lost that #1 spot. And if you read the latest report from the World Press, the latest report on World Press Freedom Index, they raise concerns particularly about the assassination of Ahmed Hussein Swale and how up to now no arrests have been made, no updates on the investigations have been provided. That must trouble all of us. They have also listed a long list, a litany of persons who have been arrested in the course of their duties. I noticed that the maker of the statement has provided a number of these names, and I do not want to bore you with the list, considering our time constraints. But what is clear is that, Mr. Speaker, independent bodies are saying that we have to set up. The Media Foundation for West Africa has also published a tall list of journalists who have been persecuted in the course of their work. They even claimed that the celebrated investigative journalist, Manasseh Azuri Awuni, they had to whisk him out of this country because of threats to his life. They had to contribute money and send him to South Africa for some protection as a safe haven. Mr. Speaker, this is not something we should be proud of. All of us in this house, we know that without the media, the work we do in this chamber cannot get to our people. We all know, Mr. Speaker, that the work we carry out in our constituencies, without the media, our people would not know, and we cannot be accountable to the people who elected us. So we need the media. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the time has come for us to repeal those sections of the Criminal Code, Section 207, Section 208, relating to false publications. It's clearly reintroducing the criminal libel through the back door. And I will appeal to the Attorney General to take steps to have that repealed. If the Attorney General will not do it, I believe that the Right Honourable Speaker may soon have to grant leave for some private member intervention so that we will repeal that aspect of the criminal code. Because I agree with the Media Foundation for West Africa. I agree with civil society organizations who are saying that if you feel that some false publication has been made and it affects your person, like in the case of the first and second ladies, in the case of Bobie and Son, you have civil remedies. You can go to court with a defamation suit. And the courts, if it is confirmed that indeed you have been defamed, they will take steps to have your reputation, which has been injured, restored.
The rule under the matter on which we are discussing is clear, that we are to comment on the statement and our comment should not generate debate. Mr. Speaker, it is not a statement of fact that journalists are unable to make comment because they are afraid of being jailed. Mr. Speaker, we have to be fair to each other in this chamber. And I think that my respected colleague can do better than that.